Welcome to the Student Ministry Matters podcast. We want to encourage, equip, and connect those with a passion to impact the next generation for Jesus Christ. Student ministry can be a lonely place. You might even feel like you're the only one in your church or community that cares about students. Well, know this, you're not alone. People all across the country are engaging Gen Z and care deeply about the spiritual direction of these young men and women. Whether you're full-time, part-time, bivocational, or volunteer, if you have a heart for students, this is the place for you.
Welcome back to the Student Ministry Matters podcast. I'm Dan Carson. I've got with me Chris Vines.
Hey, Dan. It's good to be back.
Man, it is good to be back. I know that recently we had our state meeting for the BMA of Arkansas. I wasn't able to be there. I know that you were able to be there and spend some time with some folks around the state. Those are good meetings, mainly because we have a chance to see people that we know, that we love, that we have a relationship with, that we want to kind of reconnect with. And that's a huge thing, and it's an important thing for us to do in student ministry is to have those type of relationships. You know, I think about the relationship we have with Central Baptist College. It is the place where we have our annual meeting, but it's also the place that hosts our annual Student Ministry Workers Retreat, and just some great folks there. They're our podcast partners, and they are a place that you need to send your students to. Have them check out the educational opportunities there as they're considering what's next in their education. What's that going to look like for them? And whether they're looking into a lifetime of ministry or whether they want to be a teacher or any sort of number of things. They're just the growth of the college has just been fantastic over these last 20 and 30 years. And so have your students check out cbc.edu. It's a great way for them to find out about the college. And if you're looking to finish up a degree, maybe you started one, but you didn't quite finish, they have a PACE program that's designed for you. So I'd encourage you to check all those things out at cbc.edu. Well, as we record this, we're about mid-November. It's a time when we spend thinking ahead. The next month and a half is usually pretty busy. It's full of holiday things, and I don't say holidays just because I'm afraid to say Christmas. I'm saying holidays because it encompasses a lot. We've got Thanksgiving, Christmas, even New Year's. All of those things kind of get lumped together for those of us in ministry. And so the holiday season can be kind of a big, heavy thing that we're looking at. The one that's coming up, though, pretty soon, just a couple of weeks out, is Thanksgiving. So I got to ask, Chris, what are your favorite Thanksgiving foods? What are you looking forward to? I don't know if it's Sydney that makes that, or maybe a mom or your mother-in-law.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm all about the comfort foods, so give me some turkey dressing,
Oh yeah.
Give me some of those sweet potato casseroles with the little, marshmallows on top, those kind of things, some green bean clumps wrapped in bacon, mashed potatoes, all those good things, turkey, of course, that way you can have a good nap with that tryptophan or whatever they call it, afterwards. But yeah, man. Hey, how about you? And then I got another question for you before we jump into our content today.
Well, it's the holidays are all about the carbs. I mean, really, you got to have mashed potatoes, you got to have corn, you've got to have your dressing, and you, of course, want the turkey, and whether you eat it then or then you, like later in the day, have a turkey sandwich, and then 3 days later you have more turkey sandwiches because my mom makes a bunch of turkey.
Oh yeah.
Pies, my wife makes a great apple pie, and that's already on my list. I'm like, yes. So yeah, that's especially for Thanksgiving. There's some other fun stuff that for Christmas and New Year's that I love to have. But man, yeah. Just those basics that everybody thinks of as Thanksgiving food is what I'm looking forward to.
That's good. That's right. All right. So my question to you is: Are you a person who's got your Christmas tree up already? You listen to Christmas music? Like what's going on in the background right now?
Well, no, I am not. I am, as you referred to it in our last episode, I am not a pre-Turk. I absolutely love that. And so usually we put up our tree Thanksgiving weekend. I really kind of dive into Christmas as Thanksgiving goes. But I have no problem with those that do. I mean, you think about it. Once you get Halloween out of the way, it can be Christmas all the time. I just don't want to wear myself out with the music. And I love Christmas music. I'm not one of these guys that say, I get sick of it. It's maybe because I pace myself towards it. When I was serving as a worship pastor, I'd be thinking about Christmas in July. And it was a little exhausting because by the time November got there, I was kind of tired. I don't want to say I was done with Christmas, but I'd been singing songs, Christmas carols, all of those things leading up to it during that time. So no, I'm not a pre-Turk. I like putting up my tree right afterwards. So,
hey, no shame there, man. No shame whatsoever.
We are talking again about the holidays and how that interacts and connects with our student ministries, because there's a lot of things that go on, really from Thanksgiving all the way through New Year. You've got time with your students. They have extra time off from school. And so they may be away with family members and you may not get to see them around certain points. But in other cases, you're spending extra time with them. Maybe you're having activities. Maybe you're having a Christmas party, just all sorts of things. And we wanted to talk about that idea of holiday programming and what that looks like in our churches, and then really some principles to go by so that we make sure that we're programming with purpose. As we do student ministry, we need to be intentional, whether it's the holidays or whether it's our summertime studies or whatever we're doing. We want to make sure that we are being intentional in that process, and so that our students are getting the best experience. Now, I'm not talking about making sure they have, the bells and whistles and all that, but that they have a biblical experience in our churches, because we want them to know the Bible. At the end of the day, we want them to know Jesus. We want them to know his word. And that's what it's all about. And so, Chris, what is, let's say, Thanksgiving through Christmas, what does that look like around Garrett Memorial in your student ministry? Is there any specific things that you guys do?
Yeah, good question. I think as we embark on this conversation, it's just on my mind that every church has their own culture about them, right?
Oh yeah.
Every church has their own. I mean, with that culture come certain traditions, certain things that just the church has always done years after years, that kind of thing. I think it'll be cool in just a minute maybe to talk about what are some of the most unique programs or Christmas events that we've seen churches do, because it's part of their culture. But for us and our culture at GMBC and Hope, man, we don't do a big Christmas program. We don't have a choir, and so we don't have all of those things going. But in recent years, what we have begun to do is what we call a community sing-along. So in Hope, there's what's called the Clips Auditorium. If you're familiar at all with Clips, I don't know how you say that. It's weird, but it's it's a very good brand of speakers,
right?
Yeah. And so I'm not in the know of that kind of stuff. I didn't know this before I moved to Hope. And so anyway, Paul Clips is, I believe, the originator, the owner, who no longer alive. But anyway, there's an auditorium dedicated to him, and of course, it's just kind of in the middle of downtown. It's kind of iconic and just nostalgic and that kind of thing. And so a couple of years ago, before COVID, we started what we call this community sing-along, where basically we rent out that auditorium and we just invite the community come one night. We try to work it around the time where there's the Christmas tree lighting of downtown and people can come over, and it's just kind of a big community caroling, in one building. We're just, and so our team, our musicians there, and others from the community, we partner with them. We just have a big shindig, so to speak, where we're singing Christmas carols and really just glorifying Jesus with our voices together that night. So that's something that we've started doing, and it's not really a program, but it's just one of those things that we that's becoming part of our culture.
Sure. And that is, I love hearing about that because it's got community involvement. It is reaching out, just all sorts of really cool things. Wow, that's good. What about with Thanksgiving? Let's take a step back. Thanksgiving.
Sorry,
Does your church have
that.
does your church have a Thanksgiving meal? What does that look like?
Yeah, we typically do a potluck. That's
okay.
That's it. We don't do anything more than that. We do a potluck. We have, if you or anybody else out there listening is familiar with the ministry called The Call, an organization that partners with churches for fostering kids without homes.
Right.
So I don't know if you would consider The Call an adoption agency, but they act as that in many ways. But anyway, The Call is in Hempstead County, where we're located as well. And so we each year at this time, we have a special night where we just serve them. We just bless them with food, give thanks, to them and for them, and just kind of make it a special night. So actually that's coming up for us this Sunday night. And then the following Sunday night, so the one right before Thanksgiving, is when we just do our church potluck.
When I was at Temple Baptist in Rogers, I just absolutely loved our big Thanksgiving meal. It was usually the Tuesday night before Thanksgiving, and our church would gather together in the fellowship hall. We'd be packed in there, and we would all eat, and everybody would bring their food. But then as we'd finish up eating, we would start with basically an open mic time. And I would walk
dangerous.
around. Yeah, it is dangerous, especially with children involved. But it was such a sweet time because we would walk around and with the mic, and people would share what they're thankful for. And it was just, as always, it was, there's the possibility of stuff like that turning into any sort of bragging, or it can go off the rails pretty easily. Yeah. But with the attitude that our people entered into with that, it was just so fantastic. And that was usually kind of how everything would kick off, for the holiday season.
That's cool.
Although up there, I was also the worship pastor. So weeks before that, usually September, October, we had started working on our Christmas program, and we would have the traditional, the choir, and then we would include any of our students who wanted to. So if they were 7th grade and up, they would be allowed to be involved in that. Mm-hmm. We'd have different ones over the years. But I just, I love that. Here at Calvary, we do it a little bit different. We don't have a Thanksgiving meal, and we don't have a Christmas meal. We have a holiday meal. Again, that idea is, we just wedge it in between. I think this year is going to be on December 12th. And so we'll meet together in our Family Life Center. We'll eat together, just spend some time together. And I missed so much of that this past year, as many of our listeners did. That things had to be canceled. They weren't there. Previously, we had gone Christmas caroling. We had taken groups out and just hit homes. And now more than ever, our people need that sort of encouragement. Yeah. So, there's all these activities. I know some churches, one of the churches I was at, a church member would always have this great New Year's party that would usually go till, it would right after midnight, but there would be games. And it got so big that he had to move it out of his house back up to the church because there were just too many people there. And it was fun to be a part of. But let me ask kind of a follow-up question. We've talked about activities and things that you might be doing. And I assume you probably have some sort of youth group Christmas party.
Yeah, we normally have a Christmas party next week, which is, like right now as we're recording this, it is November 11th. And so next Wednesday night is actually our last Wednesday night before Thanksgiving. And so we'll have a special time. In fact, I went on Download Youth Ministry several weeks ago, just kind of planning the semester, and I saw something called Fiesta Olympics.
Nice.
And it's like basically Taco Bell based, fun night kind of thing. And I was like, you know what, that would go well with the whole Thanksgiving thing. We'll just eat Taco Bell. So next Wednesday night is going to be Fiesta Olympics, Taco Bell style, and that's just going to be our Thanksgiving meal. But then, mid December we'll also have a Christmas party, and it's always just a fun time. We do the big saran wrap ball with all the stuff in it, and different games, and just have a big time. Yeah.
So let me ask though, how does the holidays, how do they impact your teaching schedule? I think that might be a useful thing for us to look at.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm interested to hear, you answer that as well. But like for me, I've done it both ways. I've taken a break. Like normally in a school year, I'm trying to go through at least one book of the Bible, maybe two, depending on what I'm doing. Like, so currently we're going through 1 Timothy, and so in years past, I've taken a break, and then I've done like a short 3-week series kind of leading up to Christmas. And then other years I've not done that. So like this is a year where I'm not going to do that. We'll just go through 1 Timothy together, and there may be a one-off sermon, for the holidays, for Christmas, but I haven't planned that this year. So I wouldn't say that there's any kind of real steady constant, like we're always going to be doing an Advent series.
Right.
That's just not been part of what we've done, but we have done that in the past. And so I think there's benefit both ways. I think there's good, plotting forward. But I think there's also benefit of, hey, let's stop and let's consider what this season's all about,
Well, in my pattern has been very similar to yours. There are years that we have just kind of marched on, and there are times where we take a break. And the same holds true with our Sunday morning services. And there are times where we've marched on. There are times where we've taken a definite break, because the Bible really doesn't talk about celebrating Jesus' birth.
Mm-hmm.
It makes mention of it, and you can make a case for it there, but it doesn't necessarily say, hey, we need to set aside a time to celebrate Jesus coming into the world that way. And so my question is, let's look at that real briefly. The benefits and the bad of why to let's say you want to just keep marching on with the study you've been working through. What's the value there?
Yeah, I think the value is to know that what we've been doing, and I'm talking off the top of my head right here, Dan.
Sure.
What we've been, as a youth group, what we've been doing for us, like in 1 Timothy, this whole semester, is important enough to continue doing even through the Christmas season. That anywhere there's emphasis on the Word of God, and that this book doesn't necessarily, 1 Timothy doesn't go out of season whenever December hits.
Right.
We don't have to change our methods, and or not even our methods. We don't have to change our message if we're actually preaching the Word like we should. We don't have to change our message as often as Walmart changes their items on the shelf for the seasons. And so I think that's one reason why I would say it's good just to plod forward. Like, remember that all of God's word is profitable for teaching and for correcting, for reproof. And so that's one thing I would say. But then I would say on the flip side of that, that there's benefit in stopping and spending a week or two, or 3 leading up to Christmas, focusing in on the season that we're in, why, and thinking through, like, why do we see, for me, when I think about teenagers, we know we see the same things that they do. I mentioned Walmart. We all walk into Walmart. We all see the things on the shelf. We see the consumerism. We watch the commercials, and we get all of that. And so I think it's good at times to stop and just take a look at the culture around us, and then find biblical perspective of where we are. So I'd say that it's not right to do one thing and wrong to do the other. I think it's good to do both.
Right. Yeah. And I think you're dead on with this idea of understanding the culture better. I mean, this is what our students are dealing with. If they're in public school, or if they're just walking into Walmart, they're being hit over the head with what the world views as Christmas and a Christmas celebration. Yeah. And so it's important that we give them a biblical perspective. And so that doesn't always fit right into our pre-planned schedule of how we're handling the books of the Bible. And so, yeah. I've done that before. I've taken, I've looked at different characters in the Christmas story. Just looked at it different ways so that they could better understand that.
Well, and I'd say one thing, just this is for where I am currently right now. Like one of the reasons why I'm going to stick with First Timothy is I will, in my preaching to the students, I will begin to use holiday jargon and even holiday illustrations in my preaching. And so that's one of the ways that I'll address the culture and the things that are going on in the moment,
right.
Even within First Timothy. And so First Timothy, Paul is giving Timothy the task of correcting false teaching that is going on in Ephesus. Well, is there any way that right now as a preacher to my students, I can talk about the false teaching going on around us when it comes to Christmas and when it comes to this season? And I think it's pretty apparent that, there's a lot of ways, there's a lot of avenues that I could probably take. And so I would say that as I'm plotting through the norm, I'm not ignoring the season that we're in. I'm bringing that into the conversation, within my application and within my illustrations of the text.
That's good. Well, what I want us to look at for just a few moments is some concepts for programming with purpose. And, as you look at these different activities that maybe your church already has established and that you've come into, this is something that they've had for 100 years and you're not going to be changing it anytime soon. I can imagine if I'd gone to Temple Church and said, the youth, we're just not going to be involved in that Tuesday Thanksgiving meal. We want to do our own thing. Yeah. I probably would have been run out of the church. They're just things that people love, the students love. And while we might think, well, that might be better for this or that, no, you can't do that. One of the things that my pastor there for a long time, Ron Fields, who was there before the current pastor, they had instituted birthday gifts for Jesus. And so the Sunday school hour on the Sunday before Christmas, we would have birthday gifts for Jesus. And it could be any number of things. It could be a gift of a song or a reading, or it could be something like a financial gift towards a specific ministry, or it could be, I think one person brought a vacuum or a floor cleaner of some type. All sorts of things. And they would end up on our altar area. And it was a neat time, but it was something different. So any of these things, though, that are unusual and may feel unusual to the outside, those people of that church have had there for a while and they don't want to get rid of it. But I still think these type of questions are good for us to evaluate, and then we can have conversations with our pastors, with that lead guy saying, really, maybe this needs to change. So,
yeah. Hey, and Dan, let's not ignore the elephant that is potentially in the room for some of our listeners, that some of them who may have been hired just this year, maybe at their church, maybe they've just come onto a new church and they've been there. They came on in February or March or something like that. And they're just now realizing that they're responsible for this program.
That's true.
So like, not only have they inherited a church that is doing this, but they are now responsible for leading it and directing it. And maybe that has, I don't know if anybody out there has that type of situation, but I think it's possible. And so I think, just to reiterate, what we're talking about here is thinking about the why and the purpose behind it, but also just to, hey guys, if that is you and you're listening, and you're facing a little bit of frustration or just stress because of it, I'm not going to just simply say, don't worry about it. But I will say this, that, hey, listen, don't worry about it. Jesus says, don't be anxious about anything. Right.
Yeah.
But I know that the potential here, the temptation is to be anxious about this, to have anxiety over this, and to even be frustrated at the fact that now you have to maybe lead this and you're not really sure what that means. And so I just think that's a real pressure point for some.
It is. It is.
And so I think that's why this conversation is maybe helpful.
Well, as we look at programming during the holidays, with whatever the event is, and whether you are analyzing it after the fact because there's no changing it this first time through or whatever that looks like. We want to ask ourselves some good questions. And the first is, why are we doing this? We should always be asking that why. Why are we having this party? Or even in our Christmas parties, there may be things that the kids have loved to do and maybe they were doing before you came. But if you ask the question why, you may find that maybe that's something that we need to pull back from, because it's just important to ask the whys. The second is, who is this for? And Chris, as we talked about this before the podcast started, what did you have in mind there? Who is this for?
Yeah, so the preacher in me wants to use 2 E's,
okay,
in question form. As to the question of why, is this entertaining or is this evangelistic?
Oh, okay.
And it's not to say that to be evangelistic, it can't be entertaining. But what I mean by those 2 distinctions is the question of, okay, is this program that the church is doing, is it solely for the entertainment of the church? So like maybe it's a kids program and they're going to be doing a kids choir and they're going to be singing and they're going to be doing the whole, Jesus narrative, the birth of Jesus narrative, and they're going to play that out, all that kind of thing. Is it just simply for the entertainment of the church? If that's the reason, there's nothing wrong with that. That's
right.
fine.
Yeah.
That's okay. But just know that going in. Or is it evangelistic? So in other words, is this something that you're trying to do for the community? Is this something you're trying to do for others who are outside of the church so that they might know who Christ is and put their faith in him, repent of their sin and put their faith in him? So I just think it's important to think about those 2 things as far as the why. Is it entertaining or is it evangelistic?
Yeah. And that ties right into who is it for? I mean, are you doing it for your church? Or are you doing it for your community? And as Chris said, there's nothing wrong with doing something for your church and for the people there. But it's important for us to know why and who the audience is, and just to really be able to evaluate that. Because if we don't have that good purpose, then it's just a thing that we do. And we want to be purposeful. If we want to reach our communities for Christ, we have to be purposeful. And just defining some of those things are important. So,
That's right.
There are a lot of benefits to those traditional programs, those traditional activities that the churches are doing. And so I think that's important for us to realize. There are a number of benefits in that process. One of them is simply that the church is used to doing those things. That's been their rhythm. That's been their tradition. And so they have an opportunity to kind of lean into that in a way that if you're new to the situation, you may not know the best way to start. And so you can kind of look at that and go forward. What are some other benefits that we could say that those traditional programs might offer, Chris?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because it does get to the point of the why. Why are we doing this? And so we weigh the pros and the cons, so to speak. And in this case, one of the big pros, I believe, is it gives not just teenagers, because right now we're talking about all programming, right? So like some churches have the whole choir, loft, filled, and they're doing that kind of program. I know there's one church that used to do the living Christmas tree, the singing Christmas tree. I'm sure that's not just, remote to one church. So all those kind of things. I think one of the big benefits of this is it gives people, whether they be a teenager, a young child, or an adult, the opportunity to express the gifts that they've been given by the Holy Spirit. And not only to express them, but for the younger ones and maybe even for the adults as well, but to begin working out what that gift may be. Because I really believe, like 1 Peter 4:10 says, that as each has received a gift, use it for the building up of the body, right? And so the gifts that we've been given by the Holy Spirit are meant to be used for the building up of the local church. It's meant to be expressed. And that's not to say that they can't be beneficial for the community and for others around us, but the primary purpose is for is for the building up of the body of believers for the church. And so knowing that means that the church can become this affirming agent, if you will, for those who are working out their gifts. Well, when we do Christmas programs or anything for that matter like that, what we do is we create opportunity for individuals to begin to express what their gift might be. So it could be singing, and it could be, I mean, you may say, well, the singing is not a gift of the Holy Spirit. No, I know that. But what I'm saying is the expression of serving the church in that way,
right.
you know, is a way that we can express that. It may be like for some, like for a teenager, it might be giving that one teenager the role of, hey, I want you to, at the end of the program, give a 5-minute devotional, just share the gospel, you know, because you see something as a leader in that particular teenager saying, you know what, I think he's been gifted to teach. And so I'm going to give him a small role in this setting to just teach the gospel, you know, in 5 minutes. And it's those little things. It's those things that I believe, again, affirm within other individuals what their gift is. And it just, again, it builds up the church. It builds up the body of believers, and it glorifies God.
I think about a young man named Joey that's in my church, and he has started serving through running our Pro Presenter for our worship services. Yeah. And so you've got a kid who loves to serve, who probably wouldn't get up on stage, but he's able to live out and to work out that gifting of the Spirit. And so it's a very, very cool thing. And again, some traditional programs or some even non-traditional allow you those opportunities for your students as well as the church as a whole. Yeah. It could just be very beneficial.
Absolutely. You know, and the other thing, Dan, that, you know, again, it may be like back to those 2 E's, the purpose may be just to entertain the church, right? It gives an opportunity for kids or anybody else to express those gifts. And it's for the fun, right? There's nothing wrong with that word within the church. It's for the fun and enjoyment of the church, right? I think that's a good. But a fringe benefit, if you want to say it that way, is oftentimes whenever you've got kids in a program or something like that, that brings in family members to the church to see them that maybe would not have come into that building otherwise. And so there is, even in the entertainment side of things, there is an evangelistic opportunity if we want to take it.
There is. Well, holiday programming can be a lot of fun. It can be also full of frustration if it's something that has been shoved in your hands and you don't necessarily want to do. But I think by looking at whether it is for evangelism or the entertainment of the church, either way you look at it, there's some value. One of the things that we often want to look at, though, is what could that look like in the way of outreach and evangelism, even church growth opportunities. I think that's important for the church as a whole because we want our churches to be growing. We want to reach our communities for Christ. And so, you know, what are some ways that we could do that? What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, you know, I think find ways. We've talked about this a little bit in the past.
Yeah.
Figure out where your community is already doing something.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know what I could sit here and speculate about what that is, but I know, like for us, we have a downtown Christmas tree lighting. There's we have a Christmas parade, you know, and it all kind of flows together. And so when we think about our sing along, we try to think about those things. So I would give the advice of figure out where your city, where your community is already doing something. And see if there's a way that you can easily be involved. That may not mean that you take center stage. It may not mean that you run the show, but it may mean that you can take part in it somehow. And so I think that's important as far as reaching out and being a part of the community. Yeah. And then I would also just say, think about not only where people are physically, but where they are emotionally right now as well. As we think about that, it doesn't take us too long to come to the conclusion that for some people, man, this is a really joyful time. This is a really joyful time. Yeah. They love Christmas. But for others, man, this is going to be a really hard time, really hard season. And so there's a wide range of emotions that come with this time of year. In particular, I know within our church, this is going to be a hard year for several of our families who have lost loved ones. That hurts me. That makes me grieve. But at the same time, we know that this is a joyful time of year as well. And so there's just a wide range of emotions. And so I would say, don't just think about where people are physically within your community, but think about where they are emotionally as well.
The one other thing I might add, but both of those are great, is that we look at our community and to see an area that might be lacking.
Yeah, that's good.
Be able to step into a place of love or care. Well, I've watched Mark Clifton, who's the host of Revitalize Replant with Tom Rayner. Mm-hmm. He's doing a work there in Linwood, Kansas with a small little church. And he's just looked at that small little community and said, okay, what are we missing? And he's provided that a couple of times so far at Christmas. And I think that's important. Maybe your community has something and you can step into that and join people with it, but also remember that there is maybe gaps or holes, something that used to be, but no longer exists, but could be really valuable, especially during a time when people are hurting emotionally and even physically. Yeah. So,
and with that, I think it's important just to say, I love that thought. Like, what's missing? Yeah. And like when I think about what's going on in our community, I think about like that Christmas parade and all that kind of stuff. Like, I know the demographic of Hope, Arkansas. Like, I know roughly what the percentage, the ethnicities are. Right. And so when you go to something like that in your community, pay attention to who's not there.
Oh yeah.
Right.
That's good. That's good.
And that may lead to an evangelistic, thought or opportunity for you as a church.
Well, I just want to encourage you listeners that maybe you're not going to have the time. We're talking the middle of November to the end of the year to plan something new. But we want to encourage you while you're stepping into those things that are already there, and to be thinking even a year out, thinking, okay, how can we impact our community? One of the cool things that I had heard at one point was get the web address, like Christmas in Hope or Christmas in Fayetteville. Get that domain name, and then that can serve as a platform. So there are all sorts of ways that you can navigate and reach out and love on your community. But as we work with students, we want to make sure that it's purposeful. We want to help them learn in this process. We want to stay biblical. We want to stay focused on the real reason for the season. We want to stay focused on Jesus. Again, thank you for being with us today as we've continued the conversation about student ministry. We'll be praying for you as you head into this holiday season. Pray for us as we seek to just share more. And we'll do these things together because student ministry matters.
Thanks for listening to the Student Ministry Matters podcast. Get connected at studentministrymatters.com. or follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Student Ministry Matters. Until next time, keep up the great work with your students because the work matters.